Hello, welcome to Livy's Ranger Garage. On this YouTube channel, I hope to produce a series of videos teaching you about automotive electrical systems. We will cover basic electricity, how to troubleshoot electrical problems, and how to add and modify circuits in your vehicle. These videos are primarily aimed at owners of Ford Rangers, Explorers, and Bronco 2s, but most of the principles here will also apply to other vehicles. My name is Eric, and this channel is named for my dog Livy. I hope you find these videos useful. Thanks for watching. This is Lesson 2, Electrical Diagrams and the EVTM. In Lesson 1, I drew a simple electrical diagram for you. Before we look at actual diagrams for your vehicle, let's explore where these diagrams come from. The EVTM, otherwise known as the Electrical and Vacuum Troubleshooting Manual. This is the manual that Ford put together with all the diagrams needed for troubleshooting electrical and vacuum systems in your vehicle. As we talk about electrical diagrams and working on electrical systems on your vehicle, one of the most important and most useful tools you could have is the Electrical and Vacuum Troubleshooting Manual for your exact vehicle. This book is very important and it's got awesome information in it. I'm going to go through this briefly. If you get one of these, there are actually instructions in it on how to use it. This is for my Ranger, 1993, and as we open it, one of the first things we see is a page here talking about the features of this book. It has a section on circuit operation where for some of the major and more complex circuits like the ignition and starting system and charging system, it actually tells you how those systems work. And that's important for when you're troubleshooting or trying to understand it. There are pages with schematics, and the schematics have component locations on them. We'll get into that later. There's a section talks about how to test components. They have diagrams looking at electrical connectors and showing the pinouts. That's really vital information. Notes, cautions and warnings, safety information, things like that. They have component location views, and we'll see that as I go through the book here quickly. Circuit voltages, that's helpful because not everything is 12 volts in your Ranger. There are some things such as the fuel level sender that are only 5 volts or some other voltage. As we go through the book, the next section is how to use this manual. It tells you about the different sections of the manual, how to find things, how to refer from one section of the manual to another. Here's a little list showing you what color abbreviations are for. When we talk about wires, many of the wires in our trucks are color coded so that we know what's going where. And we'll see that. It has a section here telling you how to find electrical problems, how to troubleshoot, how to take a reading with your own meter or test lamp, how to jumper things out, how to jumper out a relay or a switch if you think it's bad and see if the load actually works, how to take voltage checks. Here's some section talking about connections, good connections and bad connections, and what to look out for, and places where there could be damage to a wiring harness. It talks about the vacuum section of this manual. We're not going to talk too much about the vacuum. I might get into that later on after I do most of the electrical lessons. Here's a couple pages on electrical symbols. And we'll talk about electrical symbols, some of the more common ones. Already in lesson 1 I talked about a fuse and I drew it in my diagram. There's the symbol for a fuse. Here's a symbol for a battery. There's a circuit breaker. A circuit breaker works like a fuse, except it doesn't actually destroy itself when it functions. A circuit breaker can be reset and reused. Here's the symbol for a splice or a crimp, and here's when a wire has to jump to another page or another part of a diagram. Sometimes they'll use symbols like this. Here's a diode, there's a motor, there's a switch. I showed you a switch. There's a solenoid, and here's a relay. Here's a symbol for the relay. It'll look like this in these diagrams. So there's a lot of information in here. Here's a section we talked about for circuit operation. Here's talk about grounds. Here's a section. This explains exactly how the charging system works in your vehicle. Power distribution. Let's see. There's a starting system. Here's the ignition system. And there's several pages here of circuit operations. Engine controls for the different engine configurations. Here starts a section for the 4-liter, except for California. That's a little different. Of course, California's got stricter rules on emissions. Here's a section for engine control for the 3-liter. That's the one in my truck. So we go through circuit operations, and the next section talks about grounds. Quite often on the forums, I'll have somebody will type a question in and start a thread asking about an electrical problem, and people will answer and say, well, it sounds like you have a loose ground connection. And the next question is usually, well, where are the ground connections? Well, here it shows for different assemblies, different relays or sensors or whatever, it shows where the grounds connect. And this number right here, S108, that'll refer to another part of the book, and it'll show us where that connection is so that we can find it and check to make sure it's in good condition. These black boxes here, that 151-3-D1, that refers to another section in this book, section 151, page 3, and then when you look at page 3, on the one side there will be some letters, and across the top there will be numbers, and that forms a grid, so you can triangulate in with the D1 and find exactly on that page where connector C101 is. So you can see there's several pages of grounds. And this is how you find these things. This book is invaluable. Here's a section that talks about fuses and circuit breakers, the circuit protection section. So it explains, shows you how to tell if a fuse is good or if it's bad, how to read the ampere rating on it so that you put the right fuse back in. Here's a chart showing what colors. The fuses are all standard colors for the different amperage ratings or current ratings. So you can see that in this chart. We'll eventually talk about things called fusible links. They're fuses that are not in a package like you're used to seeing. They just look like a piece of wire, and that's really what they are, but they're a piece of wire that is sized specifically so that if it handles too much current, it will burn up and open the circuit to prevent the rest of the truck from burning down. Talks about circuit breakers, how they work, and if they're resettable. Some of them you can reset by pushing a button, some of them reset all by themselves. Here's the fuse panels with the list of fuses and circuits. There's the one for inside the cab on a 93. And here's the one for in the engine compartment. This one has relays in it. Okay, it has a section with fuses and circuit breakers and a diode. And then it has a section where some relays plug in for different circuits. After that, we start getting into the actual diagrams for different circuits, the different electrical systems in your truck. In the book, each chapter, or they call them cells, each chapter is numbered, or a cell is numbered, and so this is cell 12, page 1. We need to know that because in other parts of the book it may tell us, okay, you're going to find this information on cell 12, page 1. So there's for the charging system. Here's the power distribution, okay? And this goes across several pages, but up at the top you see this box and it extends across. You see this symbol here, that just means that matches up and it keeps continuing on. That's the engine compartment fuse box that we just looked at, and each individual fuse going to its circuit. So that's the basic power distribution to the circuits. And then we'll have, and there's several pages of this for the engine compartment fuse block, and then for the cab fuse block, it does show some of the main switches, such as the main light switch or the ignition switch back here on one of these pages, and how they figure into distributing power to the other circuits and loads. Here's a page, and there are other pages like this where it shows a connector. And this is the connector on your ignition switch. Notice it's labeled C284, and we can use that label to find it in other pages of the book. So each pin in the connector is numbered, and you can look down here and see the pin number, tell what circuit it is and what that circuit does. You notice this one is black. A1 is black, and if we look down here, that A1 is not used. There's actually two pins there labeled A1. The other one is used. But anyways, an empty hole in a connector will be shown black like that, and it's not used. Here's the same pinout information for the main light switch. So then we start going through different systems. The starting system, there's more of the starting system. Here's the ignition system. That one's a little complicated. And you'll notice at the top somewhere it will tell you which ignition system it is, because your truck could have come with one of several different engines. So this is for the 2.3 liter 4-cylinder. Here's for the 3 liter V6. Here's for the 4 liter V6. And it goes on. There's connectors for the ignition system. And it goes on through the book. And we'll look at a few of these here in a few minutes in more detail, but I'll scan the diagram into the computer so it's easier to look at. Here's a very, very simple one. And actually, I said simple, but it covers 2 pages. And this is for the horn and cigar lighter. And you can see there's the fuse that feeds the circuit. And then we see we have a choice here. Well, does your truck have speed control? That's the cruise control, or does it not? Okay, if you do not have cruise control, then you ignore this section over here and you follow down this way through the diagram. There's a connector 282, and here's how we get to the horn switch that you push on the middle of your steering wheel to make the horn blow, and then it comes down here and goes to the horns. Part of that circuit also handles the cigar lighter and the little light bulb in the ashtray. Here's another one. Here's this, just a 1-page diagram, but this shows a lot of the exterior lights, like your license plate lamps. And you see there's different options here also. This is for this section up here is if you have a super cab or a regular cab with the long wheelbase. Or you go to this section here, And there's even options for with a rear bumper or without a rear bumper. We've got the parking and stop lamps, which also have the turn signals in them. And here's the front parking and turn lamps. And there's the light switch. And this light switch, of course, you know your main light switch has several different positions. And it shows there's the off position, there's the park position, and there's the headlights position. And we'll go over more of that because there's some special little details about that diagram. If you want to mess with the radio, you want to replace your radio and put in a nicer one or newer one, or you just have to replace it because it's broken, here are the diagrams for the radio and stereo system. Here's the wires going to your speaker, and you see each wire has the color code. That's dark green with an orange tracer. Here's orange wire with a light green tracer. There's a white wire with a light green tracer, and so on. Here's a section we talked about for component testing. And this gets specific on how to test and troubleshoot particular components, such as the main light switch. Let's see, it looks like, okay, here's a section for the ignition switch. And it gives you things to do in order to test it. You do depending on what's wrong, you make different tests, and it tells you what the indications are to say that it's good or bad. There's several pages of that. This section is really cool. This is showing diagrams of your vehicle, and it's showing the wiring harness and the different connectors. And you can see, like this one right here, okay, that's a connector number 177, C177. That's for the engine coolant temperature. And that's the sensor. So that's the one, if I recall correctly, that's the one that actually sends the signal to the ECU. Let's see, here's connectors for fuel injectors. Right out there. And notice again, this is showing it for the 2.3 liter 4-cylinder engine. And there are 3 pages for this engine. So we can look through, and we get to the end of those pages, and then it starts another engine. Let's see, the next section I believe it's for both the 3 liter and 4 liter. So you can find where in the vehicle any of these connectors are. Fog lamp switch. Here's a picture of the overall vehicle showing wiring harness through the vehicle back to the tail lights or to the fuel pump, to the doors for power windows, power locks, things like that. It's all in here. The next section is a location index, and you can look up your component, what it is you want to find, and you'll see, okay, the backup lamp switch. There's a base part number. We'll figure that out after a while. I'm not sure if that's the part you order, if you need a new one or not. But here's the location, top left-hand side of the transmission. And it would be connector number 162, which we could go back and find on those other pages we just looked at. Backup lamp switch, C162. And here, this tells you the page and where to look for it. So we could go to cell 151 or chapter 151, page 11, and look at section A8, and we should find C162. So let's do that. We'll go back here to page 151, or section 151, page 11. All right, and that was at A8. So we come down the left side to section A, and then come across to 8. And there it is, C162, the backup lamp switch. And it shows it there on the left side of the transmission. I think you're getting the idea. This book can save you a lot of time and trouble. One of the last sections here gives the harness part numbers. And let's see, we were just looking at connector C182, weren't we? Here's C182, and that's part of wire assembly 9D930. You can see there are other connectors. This is a harness 9D930. And so when we go back to that 151-11, was it? 11. So C182. Oh, that was C162 we looked at. Okay, well, let's look at C162 real quick, since I know exactly where we're looking for that. Okay, that's on harness 12A690. So when we go back here and we find C162, that and all the other connectors that are listed on that harness are in this harness running around here. So that's how this book is used. It's, like I said, it's described in the front of the book. They tell you how it's used, and everything is really very well explained in here. If you can at all afford to get one of these, I encourage you to do that. They're available on eBay, and for newer vehicles you can still order them from Ford. Maybe talk to your dealer. I've even seen people on eBay selling CDs where they have scanned one of these into a computer and made a PDF file. So that's the Electrical and Vacuum Troubleshooting Manual, otherwise known as the EVTM. Let's look at a simple circuit. We'll pick the horn circuit as an easy one to start with. If you start at the top, and most often in these circuits your power is going to come in at the top of the diagram, and you'll see on our fuse panel from page 13-2, and this is going to be the fuse panel in the cab in your truck. Fuse number 8 right there is a 20 amp fuse, and that is the power for this circuit. So we'll start there, and we come down through wire number 460, which is a yellow wire with a light blue stripe on it. And then we have a choice to make. Do you have cruise control or not? Well, first let's look at not having cruise control. So we would come over to this side, and down through here you see our wire continues, and we get to a connector number 282, I believe it is. That's somewhere under your dash, probably close to the steering column, but you can look in your EVTM, as I showed you earlier in the lesson, and find out exactly where that connector is. You see that this is a 12-volt circuit, and our wire continues and goes up to the steering wheel, to the horn switch. You notice here there's a box here that tells you where you can find more information about this. Section 151, page 10, section B1. And that's where you'll find out where the horn switch is in your truck. But I'm pretty sure you know where it is. Now this thing, a slip ring, is just a device that allows electricity to be passed through a rotational element. So otherwise we would have to have extra wire somewhere in your steering wheel, and it would just wind up around the steering wheel every time you turn the wheel one way or the other. The slip ring makes it easier to do it without that. And then we get to the switch, the actual horn button that you push. It's drawn open. In other words, the horn is not blowing. And then when you push it, it closes the contact, and we go back through another slip ring and come back out of the steering wheel. At this point, we have a dark blue wire now. Okay, we've We went through a device, and now we have a different wire to differentiate that this is not the power coming to the horn button. This is power coming from the horn button. We go back through our same connector, number 282, and come down here, and our dark blue wire continues on down to the horn. And you see in the horn, there's a symbol for a coil again, just like what we have in a relay or a solenoid. You see the connector at the horn, and the power would go through that coil and down here to ground. The power also comes back out. Looks like a different connector, of course. See 0120, and across to the left horn to its connector, and through the coil and down to ground. And at that point, the horn is making noise. Now our other option, let me get rid of a little bit of this. Our other option is if we have cruise control. And the circuit does something interesting then. We start out at the fuse again, our yellow with light blue striped wire, and we come over here and come down, and we get to the horn relay. And once again, here's a box telling us where to find that relay. Now the 12 volts is available, but the relay is not energized yet, so this switch contact is open and the horn is not making noise. But our 12 volts does travel over here through the relay coil and comes out. Now we have a yellow wire with a light green stripe. We go through a connector 211, and we get back to the steering wheel again. Go through a slip ring, and you notice here there's that little black dot there. I just covered it up. Let me, there we go. You see that little black dot? That's showing a connection there. So we're supplying that 12 volts to the cruise control buttons on the steering wheel and also to the horn button. If we push the horn button like before, we close the contact, go back through a slip ring and come back out. Now we're on a black wire. Black wires are usually used for ground. They'll also use black with a white stripe for ground. We go back through connector 211 and down to ground. And you see here a note telling us which page to look for to see how the rest of that grounding circuit is wired. At that point, current is flowing because we're pushing the horn button, and that means that since there's current flowing through the relay coil, then the relay coil is pulling the relay switch contacts closed, so we also now have power coming down through the dark blue wire and continues down through the horns just like it did before. And that's how you follow the power through a circuit on the diagrams. It's really not that complicated. Of course, this is a simple one, but after we go through a few more lessons and you see some more diagrams and we trace them, you'll understand and you'll get the hang of it. That brings this lesson to a close. If you think this video was helpful, please click the like button or maybe even subscribe to my channel. Come back soon for more episodes. I also invite you to join me and my friends at therangerstation.com. It's a website featuring Ford Rangers and other Ranger-based vehicles, where you will find Ranger news, articles about members' vehicles, an active forums section, and an excellent tech library. Come join the fun. Thank you for watching Livy's Ranger Garage.